Another opportunity, because we talk about 2 to 300 million devices a year now, phones being shipped a year that are location capable, and that's a lot of smartphones and devices for the developed economies. But clearly an important next phase of growth is in the emerging markets and developing world. Lower cost devices in terms of affordability, operators that are working with much lower ARPU and sort of what they can charge for services, and might not even be 3G networks and all of that. What's that next wave of opportunity for you looking like? Do you see that as the price coming down enough that we can get the technology into that next wave of devices?
Absolutely. I think there are sort of three different ways to look at it. Mm-hmm. Emerging markets have very, very different needs. The kind of devices we will do there not only will have a different price points, they will have a very different architecture. And trying to take a Western world architecture to emerging world is really sort of a road to nowhere. Classic example would be, in-car navigation systems today, you have a price point of $1,500 to $3,000. In India, you can get a car for 1 lakh rupees, which is about $3,000. So you're not going to put a $3,000 navigation system in a $3,000 car, right? So you really have to look at it very differently. India has the lowest per call pricing in the whole world. And when I mean lowest, my friends at Lucent tell me that if you want to sell anything in India compared to Western world, just divide whatever price you had by 10x, and you have a starting point, right? But at the same time, the volumes are potentially very large. The expectations from a device can be very different. I mean, they don't need some of the fancy features we have here. Also, you will see more of multifunctional devices. Actually, in emerging world, they pay for FM on a phone, right, while you don't see it here. So I think you have to look at a different price point. You have to look at optimizations, which are very different. Here we look at how to add features. I think for those markets, you have to look at how do I make a minimalistic design? How do I take features out, which are wish features versus necessary features? And also you have to look at what are the platforms in which you are going to market. Here we market navigation systems to cars. In India, two-wheelers sell cars. There are 70 million two-wheelers versus maybe 7 million cars. So you have a 10x difference. So you will design systems for 2- and 3-wheeler devices from a volume standpoint. You don't have the same level of navigational maps here because navigation in most of those countries is done more by buildings, turn around this building to turn right rather than addresses, because in most cases either the addresses are not sequential, or they don't exist. So it's all landmark-based navigation. So it's not just a price point issue. It's really looking at the architecture fundamentally from scratch and saying, how do I address the needs of this market? If you do it, actually, you can do it quite profitably. They pay for services. Actually, value-added services on the cellular networks are extremely successful in countries like India and China.
Is power a big part of this too? Power management and consumption of?
I think power management is very important for lots of new class of applications. We have, as an industry, have clearly solved the power management issues for in-car and in-hand devices, but we are far away from solving it for what I call a wearable platform. When you buy a watch, you don't think about changing the battery every week or charging it every week or even every month. You assume that it'll last, a year. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to do the right technology, you have to have the technology which fits the platform rather than platform which fits the technology. And there are interesting developments there. For example, for connectivity, there is a new standard, Bluetooth Low Energy. Now, in those with Bluetooth Low Energy, you can have devices which are powered, what I call powered for life. They're powered for 10 years. Now imagine a connected device which is powered for 10 years, which is location aware, and you use intelligent power management with sensors and all that. So you don't keep GPS, GNSS on all the time. You only bring it on when you need it. So that combinational thinking of a system power management will allow you to address emerging needs like in lifestyle management, in healthcare monitoring. Just like FedEx thinks of package monitoring, there are lots of vital signs of us as a healthcare which we can monitor, and instead of going to the hospital when we have an emergency, anticipate an emergency and never go to the hospital. So those are the kind of applications where I think, again, these are not thinking beyond the commoditized application. Now you're starting to think about how do I use location, how do I use connectivity to really solve some fundamental problems which have not been solved before.
Right. And it's also sort of a frontier of sort of the technology piece too,
Correct.
in terms of how the location capabilities evolve. Okay, one of the things I've certainly noticed at the limited amount of time I've had to be on the show floor here, is this particular CTIA, there seems to be a big focus on the machine-to-machine market. And when you think also about all the operators who are building out 4G networks, it's predicated upon 300% and 400% device penetration, and also all sorts of different industries getting into the M2M space. Could you talk a little bit about how you see the location roadmap working into M2M?
Yeah.
And what some of the biggest opportunities you see there?
Yeah, actually, if you look at one of the themes we have here is we have gone from everyone to everything.
Right.
Because ultimately, if you take this whole concept of crowdsourcing beyond software crowdsourcing to a sensor crowdsourcing, you can think of almost every device becomes a sensor in this whole complex network of clouds. And all those sensors are somehow or another connected, and location awareness becomes more and more important in that connected world. And those sensors can be basically everything which we can get information from or provide information to, from energy meters, right? You can basically look at all your energy meters with sensors, and that gives you an idea of what the energy consumption patterns in particular area are. So there are new concepts being brought up. If all our devices somehow or another had location awareness and had earthquake sensors built in, right? Then we'll have a much better idea of earthquake anticipation, because all this information could be combined to really sense where the geoactivity is. PG&E is going through this issue of gas pipes, where are all the valves and all that. They were initially resisting, and now they're saying they're going to open up the location of all the valves. So that again, information like that, where location and connectivity, when you connect location-aware devices, you suddenly create a really self-expanding network of information. Now, what you do with that information is where the value creation comes in.
Yeah, one of the things that's always struck me about the machine-to-machine space is that there's huge opportunities there, although there's all sorts of different verticals, and each of them has its own sort of ecosystem, so to speak. So it's fragmented, But are there one or two particular segments of the machine-to-machine market that you see sort of really bubbling up over the next year or two, where you're focused on?
We as a company are more focused on the horizontality of the space. So we look at some of these vertical markets, work with our customers, but our focus is over a period of time, how can we provide horizontal technologies which then customers can add value on top of it? So our main focus is really on horizontal segments. But within those, there are clearly categories. Lifestyle and healthcare is one area where we see both connectivity and location can play a very important part. Energy management is another area where we believe that location and connectivity can play major parts. And then tracking. And that tracking is, again, when we think of tracking, it's broader than asset tracking. It could be anything from pet tracking to child tracking to any type of tracking application. Those are sort of the three, I would say, main areas where we're.
Yeah. I'm going to turn us back to the consumer for a moment. and talk a little bit about one of the things you've done here with these events, bringing together the industry, and as well as sort of being one of the leaders in the space, is a huge amount of work on sort of the education of the different companies who are in the value chain about what's possible and what the new capabilities are. But in terms of getting this out there to the consumer market, I mean, what do you think we could be doing as an industry to more effectively communicate? Because you mentioned this earlier in your remarks, to more effectively raise awareness to consumers of what can be done, how the capabilities have evolved, so they can maximize the capabilities that they have in their devices they may not even know that they have.
Right. And I think there are sort of two areas where we as an industry obviously need to do a better job. One is, of course, making them aware of the capabilities we have. Clearly, today, location-based services in general are getting significant more promotional dollars from service providers and device providers, because that's becoming sort of, quote unquote, it's the buzzword of the day. So I think people are getting more educated about the fact that location is getting into all kind of devices. The Navtec, the Nokias of the world have done a great job there. Google has said publicly, even at one of our previous events, that they look at location being very important to providing the relevant information.
In fact, just last week, I think they announced a hyperlocal.
Hyperlocal, exactly.
Yeah.
And then now Facebook with the Face Places has again added locations. So I think people are becoming, even at a mass market level, becoming aware of location itself. They still are not aware what to do with it and what device has it. And that's, I think, one area clearly more can be done. But my worry is the other way around. I think we as an industry also need to set the expectation of people right, of what you can do with location. In the early days of navigations, we had examples of people driving their vehicles right through into across a bridge into a river, because that's what their navigation system was telling them. And they forgot that they have eyes and senses to see. Today, clearly, the location technology in the devices still has, as I said, a number of challenges in terms of its capability to provide quality of service relevant to many of the applications they are being used, especially applications which assume indoor location. We may get indoor location here, but is it really the accurate indoor location when it's based on a survey of trucks driving outside with access points or things like that? So quality of accuracy of location indoor and the quality of service. So I think setting expectations properly and making sure that the applications themselves can actually query the system to the quality of location.
Right. So it's almost like we have to somehow communicate to customers on a device the sort of the level or quality of location, if they're very reliant on a particular application, that they're getting at that particular point in time, almost like we have a number of bars of service.
Correct.
For your
and
wireless
some of that is
Wi-Fi.
I think can be implemented in the richness of the location API you built as a layer, right? So instead of making it very hardware specific or very application specific, you create a layer of API which says, here is the quality of service expectation and here is the quality of service deliverable. And I think that level of cooperation, and that's why we do this event in some senses. If you can get all of the elements of ecosystem together, these problems are more easily solvable than each of us going on our own path.
I will bet you that your average consumer doesn't know that GPS doesn't work all that well indoors.
Yeah, I know that.
Condition, they came from a car heritage, so they were never indoors, or rarely indoors with a car, right? So.
Absolutely. I look at, and I think all of us should look at our family as the best example of consumer. And between my wife and my kids, I get lessons every day of what the expectation of consumer is. Trying to explain to my kid why GPS doesn't work indoors is, losing battle. They say, so Dad, solve this problem. What do you mean it doesn't work indoors, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.